5 NBA championships, 3 MVPs, a smile that captivated the entire globe. By the fall of 1991, Irvin Johnson was sitting at the absolute peak of the world. But then, a single phone call stopped time. He didn't feel sick. He hadn't missed a single step on the hardwood. He only found out he was HIV positive because of a mandatory physical for a standard life insurance policy. Everything changed when he announced his retirement and shocked the planet.
The HIV virus that I have attained, I will have to retire from the Lakers today.
Yet nobody saw this coming. Instead of fading away, he orchestrated a legendary second act, building a mind-boggling $1.6 billion empire to become only the 4th billionaire athlete in human history. But this doc isn't just about the business, the rings, or his blood feud rivalry with Larry Bird. To understand the legend, you have to realize his entire cinematic career was hanging by a thread from the very beginning. Long before the world knew him as Magic, he was just a kid in Michigan fighting a hidden disability that almost broke his spirit entirely. This is the story of how a dyslexic kid became the greatest point guard ever. Prior to the championships, before the billion-dollar empire, and long before the world knew him as the ultimate orchestrator, he was just Junebug. Growing up in Lansing, Michigan, Irvin Johnson Jr. was a kid with an infectious smile, but behind that smile was a deeply hidden secret. Every single day at school felt like drowning. He suffered from severe dyslexia. The words on the chalkboard simply wouldn't make sense. For years, the struggle went entirely unnoticed, leaving a young Irvin feeling isolated and falling dangerously behind his peers. But then, a crucial intervention changed his trajectory. He was placed in special education reading classes. For a kid desperately trying to fit in, it could have been humiliating. Instead of letting it break him, Irvin used the setback to build an obsession. He refused to be outworked. He later credited those agonizing, repetitive hours in special ed for forging the exact iron discipline he needed to memorize massive NBA playbooks and negotiate ruthless corporate business contracts decades later. However, on the asphalt, he didn't need to read, he just needed the rock. By the time he was a teenager, he wasn't just playing the game, he was conducting it. A 6'8" point guard, moving with the fluidity of a dancer, throwing no-look passes that left defenders stumbling over their own feet. Everything changed when he stepped onto the court for Everett High School at just 15 years old. He didn't just win, he put on a masterclass, dropping a stat line that looked completely fake. 36 points, 16 rebounds, and 16 assists. A local sports writer sitting in the bleachers was absolutely mesmerized. After the final buzzer, he walked up to the exhausted teenager and handed him a moniker that would echo through sports history forever: Magic. Irvin just laughed it off. To him, it was just a flashy headline for the local morning paper. He honestly thought a name that bold would never actually stick.
I didn't think it would stick.
But there was one problem. When he went home and casually mentioned it to his deeply devout Christian mother, she was horrified. She didn't see it as a compliment. She thought it was pure blasphemy. To her, claiming the title of Magic was ungodly, arrogant, and a direct sin against her faith. She absolutely hated it. Yet, despite his own doubts and his mother's protests, the name spread like wildfire. The entire state of Michigan was soon hypnotized by the kid they called Magic. But innate ability in Michigan wasn't enough. Before he could conquer the pros, he was placed on a collision course with a ruthless, trash-talking forward from French-lit Indiana, Larry Bird.
It was a small school and he ain't playing against anybody, which is fine. Still dominated.
Spring 1979, the NCAA championship game between Magic's Michigan State Spartans and Bird's undefeated Indiana State Sycamores wasn't just a basketball game. It was a cultural earthquake. This was the collision of two completely opposite worlds. On one side, Magic with his blinding smile and electrifying Showtime-style passes. On the other side, Bird, a deadly, stoic sniper with a massive chip on his shoulder. At the time, the NBA was actually struggling. Tape-delayed games and low ratings were killing the league. But this college matchup, it drew nearly 35 million viewers. To this very day, it remains the single most watched college basketball game in human history. Bird had been an unstoppable offensive machine all year, but then Magic took the floor. He didn't just play against Larry Bird, he orchestrated a psychological and tactical masterclass. Magic's suffocating size and court vision completely dismantled Bird's perfect season, leading Michigan State to the national title. As the final buzzer sounded, Magic gleefully cut down the nets. Meanwhile, a devastated Larry Bird buried his face in a towel, weeping in the locker room. A blood feud was born, a rivalry so intense it would literally save the sport of basketball. But raw talent alone wouldn't be enough to survive the cutthroat reality of the NBA. To bring this epic rivalry to the ultimate stage, to conquer the basketball world, history itself would have to flip in his favor, literally. In 1979, the NBA draft order for the #1 overall pick wasn't decided by a complex lottery system. It was decided by a simple, brutal coin toss. The Chicago Bulls called heads. Coin landed tails. Everything changed when the Los Angeles Lakers secured the rights to draft Magic Johnson. Had that coin landed on the other side, Magic would have played his entire career in Chicago. The legendary, fast-breaking Showtime Lakers era would have been completely erased from existence. Instead, a 20-year-old kid packed his bags for Hollywood. He was immediately paired with Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, the most dominant and stoic big man in the league. Magic injected a frantic, run-and-gun energy that Los Angeles had never seen before. But a brutal test was waiting for him at the absolute highest level, the 1980 NBA Finals. The Lakers were up 3-2 against Julius Erving and the powerhouse Philadelphia 76ers, but disaster struck in Game 5. Kareem suffered a severe, crippling ankle sprain. He was entirely ruled out for Game 6 on the road in Philadelphia. The media wrote the Lakers off. Without their MVP center, they were marching into a slaughterhouse. But then, the rookie stepped up. When the team boarded the flight to Philly, a devastated Lakers roster was sitting in dead silence. Magic walked down the aisle, looked at his veteran teammates, and confidently smiled. "Never fear, EJ is here." The situation then took an unexpected turn. Head coach Paul Westhead didn't just ask Magic to play more minutes, he asked the rookie point guard to start at center.
Magic Johnson at center is going to create some problems. What kind of problems? We'll have to wait and see.
When the referee tossed the opening tip, a 20-year-old guard was jumping against Philadelphia's towering big men. And from that moment on, he put together the greatest clutch performance in basketball history. He didn't just survive in the paint, he completely dominated it. In a highlight that still echoes today, Magic drove across the lane and launched a sweeping, flawless baby hook shot over the defense, perfectly mimicking Kareem's legendary move. The stat line was downright terrifying. 42 points, 15 rebounds, and 7 assists. He secured the championship and became the only rookie in NBA history to win the Finals MVP award, a record that remains entirely unbroken today. And this was only the beginning. He was the undisputed king of Los Angeles. However, the honeymoon phase wouldn't last. A storm was brewing on the East Coast. His old rival in Boston was rising to power, and Magic was about to suffer a public humiliation so devastating, the media would aggressively strip away his magical nickname and brand him with something far more toxic. By 1984, the Magic and Bird rivalry had become the heartbeat of the NBA. But for Magic, the pressure to maintain that Showtime perfection was becoming an unbearable weight. In the '84 Finals, the Lakers faced the Boston Celtics, a clash of titans that felt like a war for the soul of the sport. It was the ultimate test. But then, the wheels came off. In a series defined by physical grit and tactical brilliance, Magic committed a string of costly, uncharacteristic turnovers in the final minutes of key games. The Lakers collapsed, handing the title to the Celtics on a silver platter. The media, who had once hailed him as a savior, turned on him in an instant. They didn't just criticize his play, they orchestrated a character assassination. They stripped away his Magic moniker and mocked him with a label that was meant to sting, to humiliate, to break him. Tragic Johnson. It was a cold, calculated attempt to redefine his entire legacy. Everywhere he went, he heard the whispers. He saw the headlines. He was no longer the phenom. He was the GOAT who couldn't close when it mattered most. Most athletes would have crumbled. They would have retreated into the shadows, letting the narrative swallow them whole. But Irvin, he did something different. He didn't make excuses. He didn't lash out at the press. He locked himself in the gym. He spent that entire offseason in a state of absolute, obsessive solitude, replaying those turnovers in his mind until they burned. He used that tragic label as a weapon, channeling the humiliation into a singular, laser-focused mission: revenge. He came back the following year a different man. The smile was still there, but behind it was a predator's edge. He dismantled the Celtics in the '85 Finals, finally exercising his demons in the very arena where he'd been mocked. He had proven that he could endure the fire. Yet, as he sat on top of the world, having evolved from a tragic figure into a multi-time champion, he was entirely unaware that the most terrifying test of his life was already waiting in the shadows. A test that wouldn't happen on the court, but in the sterile, quiet room of a life insurance office. Everything changed on a random day in 1991. A routine physical, a blood test, and then the news that would shatter his world. He wasn't fighting for a championship anymore. He was fighting for his life. And when he stood before the world to make the announcement, he wasn't just a basketball player. He was a man standing in the eye of a hurricane with no idea if the world would ever let him walk back onto a court again. The announcement was global. It was the day the world stopped spinning. Magic stood there, calm, collected, and brave, telling the planet that he was retiring immediately due to his HIV-positive status. The outpouring of public love was overwhelming. He was a symbol of resilience. He was a hero.
Thank you, fans, for coming out every night and supporting me. So thank you.
But then, the reality of the era set in. Almost overnight, the corporate world vanished. His commercial sponsors, the ones who had built him into a global brand, dropped him like he was radioactive. The panic of the early 90s was absolute. Misinformation was everywhere, and fear was the only language people spoke. But there was one problem. Magic didn't want to be a patient. He wanted to be a player. When he attempted a return to the NBA for the 1992 All-Star Game, he expected his brothers to welcome him back. He was wrong. Behind the locker room doors, a revolt was brewing. Active NBA stars, men he had mentored, men he had campaigned for, were whispering in the hallways. They were terrified. They believed that a simple bump, a scratch, or a splash of sweat during a rebound could transmit the virus.
It was a cold, lonely betrayal. The pressure became too much to bear, and he was effectively forced into a second, premature retirement before the 1992-93 season could even begin. Yet, nobody saw this coming. While the basketball world was turning its back on him, Magic was busy rewriting the rules of what an athlete could be. He didn't just sit in the house. He walked into boardrooms. He sat down with Howard Schultz, the CEO of Starbucks, and he didn't just ask for a deal, he gave a masterclass. He told corporate America that they were ignoring the most profitable markets in the country, the inner cities. He built the first franchised Starbucks locations in underserved urban neighborhoods, proving to the world that these communities were gold mines. He didn't just break barriers, he built a $1.6 billion empire. Then came the medical industry. In 2012, he quietly bought a stake in a small Florida managed care company. Everyone thought it was just another celebrity vanity project. What happened next shocked Wall Street. When Anthem bought that company in 2015, Magic made 16 times his original investment. He had turned his post-retirement life into a masterclass of wealth creation, becoming only the fourth athlete in history to achieve billionaire status. And amidst this billion-dollar pivot, he never lost his sense of wonder. He was the royal servant in Michael Jackson's iconic 1992 music video, Remember the Time, and he was immortalized by the Red Hot Chili Peppers in their self-titled anthem, Magic Johnson. He was everywhere, doing everything. He had conquered the media, he had conquered business, and he had survived the darkest diagnosis of his life. But even with the billions and the fame, he was still the kid from Lansing who just wanted to control the game. When we look back at the career of Earvin Magic Johnson, it's easy to get lost in the numbers. The 5 rings, the 3 league MVPs, the billionaire status. But if you look closely, none of those things were guaranteed. Every single milestone was a battle. He fought the label of tragic to earn his legend. He fought the ignorance of an entire era to redefine what it meant to live with a life-altering diagnosis. He fought the expectations of a society that didn't think a basketball player could own the boardroom. But what really made him different? It wasn't just the no-look passes or the 6'8" frame that defied physics. It was his defiance. He was a kid with dyslexia who refused to let his limitations define his ceiling. He was a son who honored his mother's faith while shaking the world with his own brand of magic. He was a teammate who stood tall when the rest of the league tried to box him out. He didn't just play the game, he saved it.
He turned the NBA from a tape-delayed afterthought into a global, multi-billion-dollar juggernaut. He proved that the most dangerous thing a person can have is not a jump shot, but an unstoppable, infectious, relentless joy. Even today, when you see that smile, you aren't just seeing a former athlete. You're seeing a man who touched the sky, fell to the depths, and built his own ladder to climb back to the top. He taught us that your life isn't defined by the cards you're dealt, or even the ones that get flipped against you, but by how you play the hand once the ball is in your court. From a kid named Junebug to the titan of industry he is today, he showed us all exactly how it's done. And looking back at it all, it's clear. The name was never just a moniker. It was a promise, and he kept it every single step of the way.